care if they had a corporate sponsor as their main actual name.
Absolutely not.
I think we all grew up in NASCAR country. Maybe that's part of it. Bring back cigarettes. Like, make it the Marlboro 12. Camel Light.
All right. When we come back, another quarterback NIL story, but very different. But also involving a very big out-of-conference game this week that I cannot wait to tune into. We'll talk Darian Mensah and Duke, which play Illinois when we come back. Welcome back to the College Football Inquirer. We talked one quarterback NIL story that will affect this week's games. Let's talk about a different one. This one, Ross wrote, went to Duke and visited with Darian Mensah, who is the quarterback who transferred from Tulane, had a wonderful first year as a starter at Tulane, and then very quickly headed to Duke. It was, guys, I'll set the table here. Duke wins 9 games last year. The transfer portal opens. And one of the first names we hear when the transfer portal opens is that Malik Murphy, last year's Duke starting quarterback, has entered the transfer portal. And you're thinking, okay, Malik Murphy, who transferred from Texas, they won 9 games last year. He threw something like 32 touchdown passes. What is going on here? Well, about 48 hours later, we understand why, because Darian Mensah is headed to Duke. And Ross, you met up with Darian. You talked to his mom, who sounds like a pretty incredible person. How did this all come together?
Yeah, it's pretty like wild story. I was kind of fascinated by it last year when some of the amounts for his deal were sort of released or leaked out, right? That it was around $4 million, or at least with incentives and
per
stuff.
year, yeah.
$4 million per year, a 2-year deal. I was like, wow, like nobody's probably heard of this. Nobody had heard of him, right? Last summer, hardly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he hadn't even won the job.
He was like QB3 at Tulane going into camp.
Going into the competition. So, and now he's getting paid more than basically anybody in the country. So, I thought I would visit there and meet with him and figure out exactly what happened. And it is a fascinating story. I did not expect sort of the story to turn into one about his family's financial struggles. I didn't realize that going in, that his family, his mom raised 3 kids by herself, or 4 kids by herself, and low income housing out in California, had her car repossessed. We filed for bankruptcy at some point. I mean, just they were in the low of the lows financially. And now, right, it's kind of, I wrote the story as a way to like sort of show, after learning all that, sort of show like this new era of college athletics, college sports, while it's criticized so much by those in power as being a Wild West and chaotic. Here is the positive of it, is that it can change a family's fortunes forever. And I talked to his agent from Young Money AA. Is it AAPP Sports?
Just say Lil Wayne's agency.
Lil Wayne's agency. And he walked me through like when. So I just kind of walk everybody through like how this all transpired last year, because it's sort of fascinating. Darian won the job in the 3-man battle in fall camp, just like 2 weeks before Tulane season started. Had a great September, and as what happens, right? Agents sort of get going and want to jockey to try to land these players. And he ended up signing with Lil Wayne's agency in October. And his agent, Noah Reisfeld, told me that he knew pretty much early on that there was a path here for him to sign this, perhaps the most lucrative college football contract for a player ever. And part of that was, as we mentioned sort of earlier about like the front loading that was happening before this new enforcement entity started. All these schools were kind of jockeying, scrambling to build a roster with regulation free, sort of no rules. And so that meant prices were skyrocketing. And that's sort of what happened here. And they ended up signing a deal that while the details weren't specifically revealed to me, I think the $4 million figure is pretty close to real for each year for those 2 years, which shocked me at first. I didn't realize that it was that much. But then Manny Diaz although he didn't confirm the number, he put the number in perspective for me, which I thought was really interesting. Of that, look, college is going to operate sort of on the same lines as pro ball when it comes to percentages you dedicate to a position of your pool, right? And I think Open Doors just came out with some numbers on that 18 or anywhere from 15 to 25% of rev shares being spent on the quarterback position, with most of that being spent on the starter. If you do the math, that's about anywhere from $2 to $5 million on the quarterback position, and probably at least a majority of that, again, to the starter. So it makes some sense.
And I noticed in those numbers, Ross, the ACC and the Big 12 are spending more on quarterbacks percentage-wise than the SEC and the Big 10. Yeah. Probably to keep those guys from going to the SEC and the Big 10. Like, you have to give them a little premium to keep them from picking a Big 2 conference school.
That chart was fascinating, right. And I don't want to derail the subject because I want to talk about Mensah, but there's so many interesting things about the difference in the value that is being ascribed financially to different position groups. Andy, I think you and I talked about this over text.
SEC's paying the most for D-line.
Just saying, guys. Might want to look into that. Anyway, yep. I love a quote that tells the story. I think you've got several in here, but it's real simple if you get down into it, Ross, where it says, "My kids watch me crawl out of that hole. When you're stuck in poverty, all I wanted to do was get out of that poverty. That's it. That's all." There's a nice you've got a little piece in here where say, hey, like, you know what?
That's Darian's mom.
Yeah, that's Naomi. She's now in a studio apartment. They have a money manager. They got bankers. They got people. This kind of ties back into what we were talking about earlier, where you had a shift in philosophy over the years, or what was right, what was wrong. Guys, just the amount of quarterbacks that make it to the first round of the NFL draft, which is an infinitesimal amount, right? Just so tiny. Only half of those even make it to a second contract. And the reason why a second contract is important is that's your life-changing generational money for a family. So this is, I kind of want to sit with this for a second, because we've talked so much about how money's changing college sports in a very alarmist way. But this kid, if he blows his knee out in 2 weeks, if he's just mid-level, if he just ends up as a backup in the league for 2 years, has enough wealth now to fundamentally change his family forever, provided that it is well managed.
I want to point out, like, Godfrey, you and I have kids. We're in very stable situations, 2-parent homes, make decent money. It's really freaking hard to raise kids.
Dude.
Even when you have all the advantages in the world, which we do. What this lady did, and Ross, you pointed out in the story, not only did she raise her own 3 biological children, she had an ex-husband who had brought another child into their marriage. And when the marriage dissolved, she kept raising the kid, like, as her own. Like, so 4 children by yourself in dire financial straits. Like, I cannot even imagine the daily level of stress and the daily level of how much you have to just work to make sure everybody's breathing still.
And she obviously needed a lot of help with this. Her father and her sister and her sister's husband helped a lot. Bought cleats for Darian. Took him to games. His sister, by the way, then interesting kind of side story. His sister Grace is a soccer player at Oregon, on the women's soccer team there at Oregon, and they're twins, and they're very close. And so they were, all the family members and even the neighborhood parents would take them to school and games. And so she had sort of this at least a little bit of a support system to help her, but it sounded like a grind for sure. And she sounded, when talking to her, it sort of sounded like a woman who never thought she would get out of all that. Like when Damn. she we had it was an hour-long conversation, and I think 3 different times or so, right, she had to stop and pause to break down emotionally, because I don't think she had really talked to anybody, because this just happened, right? He became a millionaire in January. Before that, he had hardly no money to his name, and he became a multi-millionaire.
She's been grinding as a parent for 20 years.
Yeah. And
this all happened within the last 9 months.
Right.
The psychological and emotional patterning, if you don't grow up with wealth or even at the mid sort of, like whatever the middle class is anymore, you don't lose that overnight. That's going to be her mindset for the rest of her life, which is why you probably caught her in such an emotional state, Ross. I think it's brutal. I want to shout out a couple coaches here. One, the now Houston coaching staff identifying Mensah, right? I mean, Willie Fritz from your story. They kind of pulled him out of the pile.
Didn't bring him from Troy. Willie Fritz signed him. He was on the roster when Summerall got there.
Yeah, kind of pulled him out of the pile, right, Ross?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so Tulane's son, Willie Fritz's son, Wes, was on staff with him there. He was their general manager, and they're now both at Houston doing similar things, head coach and general manager. And Wes Fritz, Willie's son, sort of found him, and he doesn't. I interviewed him. He didn't remember exactly how he found him. He just remembers seeing him on lists, and then he saw maybe on social media just a couple of recordings, of Mensah sort of running around and throwing, and he's like, well, this is interesting. And he was a high academic kid to get into Tulane. Obviously, they have pretty high standards. Yeah. So they flew out there. And Mensah was like, it's a lot of this I didn't include in the story, so it's interesting. But Mensah was, when they landed and met with him, they could tell he had no clue how recruiting worked. No clue. This was his senior year of high school. And he was in his senior year. It had gotten to that point. He had 0 offers. He was not going to play college ball potentially. And so he had no clue how recruiting worked, commitments and all this stuff. So it was interesting hearing Wes Fritz sort of tell the story. And then they offered him. And then he got a flood, quote, of offers from Lindenwood and Idaho State followed Tulane in their offers. But Wes Fritz, I think I included this in the story, said that Lindenwood and Idaho State were probably is this Tulane offer real? Is this kid really? Because, again, he doesn't have, the strongest arm. In fact, there are plenty of people on, Malik Murphy, they basically, and we didn't talk about this, Andy, but you mentioned it a little bit, Tulane or Duke, pushed out Malik Murphy. That happens all the time, right? It was just hey, we're going to bring in this other guy. If you want to stay, that's fine, right? But we're bringing in this other guy, and that was sort of the plan. And so anyway, so Malik Murphy has way stronger of an arm, right? A lot of people at Tulane that Darian Mensah breed out had way stronger of an arm. We're bigger, we're faster, but there is some intangibles about this kid, and it's instinctive. It's his pocket presence. It's his escapability, his accuracy, all the things. And he's just really, really sharp.
He is great. If you watch this Tulane film, he is great at when pressure flushes him out of the pocket. He can move around, but he is not looking to just scramble. He will move around behind the line of scrimmage, find an open spot, reset himself, and figure out exactly who's wide open. It happened again and again and again last year at Tulane. And there are not many people in the world who can mentally process like that. And that's why he was so sought after.
Another thing that stands out in your story, Ross, I'm noticing a trend amongst head coaches who are considered the next big thing, the next big class of coaches. John Summerall has a quote in here. It reminds me a lot of the way Kenny Dillingham has been talking at Arizona State as well. I think you had it pretty high up here. It says, in my career, I've left jobs for more money. That's it. And he's, there's more to the quote, but the financials have become so great. How does a guy say no? Contrast that, guys, with the various other coaches. And I don't have one off the top of my head, Andy, you might, that I could use as to demonize here, who have said, all kids are looking for, it's an instant gratification society. We just got done talking about the life-changing, generational wealth-changing moment for a guy who you guys just said doesn't have as strong an arm for elite college play, which means this guy's probably not going to be winning any Super Bowls 10 years from now. This is why it's so fundamentally important that we do this. And I also love the idea that Summerall and these other coaches are just putting it out front and saying, hey, this is okay. This is part of the function. This is what we've
been doing forever. Yes.
Yes. This is the function of college sports. And by the way, this is how we built American capitalism. And that's okay. Let's move on from the pearl clutch.
I'll point out that Kenny Dillingham and John Summerall, what do they have in common? They're in their 30s.
Yeah.
They're going to be doing this.
There's something to that, right?
For 25 more years. So complaining about the system that will probably exist for the remainder of your career is probably not very smart. The coaches who are complaining are all people who are not going to work in college football anymore in 5 years.
Yeah, it's a back in my day mentality, and they'd rather rage against the dying of the light than try and figure out a way to shine it forward. I didn't mean to get so poetic. Sorry.
Thank you, Dylan Thomas. You know, that's a villanelle. Great villanelle. 14 lines, 3 quatrains and a couplet.
I don't
Love it.
I don't
we
know.
can do
Andy,
a poetry
what are you
section.
talking about?
We could do a poetry section.
Oh, no, please. Godfrey, no.
Come on, Ross.
Hey,
Please.
we're talking
Poetry?
about Duke here. Duke's playing Illinois this week. I can't wait to see that game because Illinois obviously brought everybody back from a very good team last year, except for their 2 best receivers, but they've also replenished that through the transfer portal. So Luke Altmyer versus Darian Mensah, Brett Bielema versus Manny Diaz. Going to be a lot of fun. We got to take a pause, though, and when we come back, we failed you last week. We failed you. We all gave you a game
we
that we
warned
felt
you.
really good about.
We warned
and we
you.
were all
warn them. We did warn them.
Yeah, we were all wrong.
We
did warn you.
Like,
True.
don't take this advice.
There's no sports book logo floating up, guys. There's a reason.